Hi, and welcome to this live reading from The Abduction of Sarah Tarbell as Her Soul Remembers by Stuart Ledwith, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Groton, Massachusetts Colony, 21 June, 1707. Beneath the great blue summer sky of her 14th year, Sarah Tarbell was allowing herself the distinct privilege of picking and eating a few fresh, ripe cherries in the orchard. Her younger brothers, John and Zachariah, had climbed the tree with her. They were chatting about all the usual things in their young lives. Zachariah was imitating a robin pecking away at the cherry in his hand, John laughing at his antics. The exuberant joy of the moment was crushed as they looked down from the tree they had climbed. Below them was every young Puritan's greatest nightmare: 7 Mohawk warriors in full war paint. Her parents constantly warned her to be on guard, never be lax if even for a moment. Too frightened to scream in the presence of the brandished tomahawks, the children climbed down in silence. She had not seen them. The boys had not seen them. From whence had they come to be here in the family orchard, here in Groton this day? And why? Life as they had known now ceased to exist. I will never forget those faces, painted in black, red, and yellow stripes. Their faces glowed a faint orange in the sun, frightening and alluring, fierce yet trusting at the same time. I felt compelled to sense I would survive them. The warriors quickly ushered the children across the acres of cornland to the nearest tree line, pushed them to the ground. The leader of the raiding party quickly tied a leather collar with a lengthy leash around Sarah's neck and pulled it tight. Still too frightened to speak, Sarah offered no resistance other than to insert her fingers into the collar as he tightened it, to keep enough space to breathe. Neither she nor the boys were shown any favors. All 7 kept their eyes on the farm buildings to see if they had been discovered or followed. Using hand signals and a few guttural sounds, the Indians led their captives away post-haste. The boys were used to running races. Sarah was not, and tired quickly. She was dragged by her hair and by her wrists, pushed through the brush, tearing her skirts and scratching her bare arms. Falling again, she begged to stop for a breath, whereupon the leader yanked her to her feet at the end of her tether, thumped her breastbone hard with the forefinger of his powerful right hand, and motioned with authority to move on to the north. The 2 warriors in the lead again picked up their pace. John and Zachariah ran with them step for step. After Sarah stumbled for the last time, Matui's, the leader of the raid, picked her up and carried her across his shoulders like the dead deer she had seen her father carry. She did not resist, even though breathing was difficult in this position. She did not resist, even though she had not ever been touched in this way by a man, especially a man this powerfully strong. His grip on her was the strongest she had ever felt. Still, it was better than being bludgeoned to death as a few of her friends from the first Groton settlement had in earlier raids. She had attended way too many funerals already, and she was not about to attend her own. She couldn't help wondering where they were taking her and her brothers. So many thoughts, so many questions ran through her battered mind. What is to become of her and her brothers? How can I best protect them? Try to memorize the path we are taking, so if we can escape, we can find our way home. What is sticking into my stomach from the back of his head? Can I bear this trial, Lord? Why must I be tried by you, my Lord, at every turn? Have I been a bad girl? What have I done? Will I ever see my home again? I hear water running. We are stopping. I hear Zachariah scream. Something has really frightened him. Matues and his raiders are laughing at him. He is only 7 years old. What has he done? Finally, I'm on my own 2 feet. I now see the culprit. A large brown bear is asleep right here in front of us, and these men are laughing. Matui's pats Zechariah on the back and takes him up to the sleeping bear, which turns out to be a bear skin covering 2 boats. With that, even Zechariah can join in the laughter. And I need to pee, only where? How do I ask them? Apparently the look on my face and my hands over my bladder was familiar enough for Matui's to understand my need. He motioned to the nearby trees and led me there by my leash and pointed to a place by a tree where I could squat. I couldn't go with him watching, and he understood my problem, so in an effort to help me out, he went to the other side of the tree and began to relieve himself as if we had known each other for 100 years. It helped. I could not watch him. Hearing him was quite scandalous and new to me. He had no God-fearing manners, yet he seemed to be a man I could trust. As soon as I finished, he yanked me to my feet with the tether, and we got aboard the boats. Finally, I could rest. The boys wanted to row, and the men led them, and quite soon the boys got into the rhythm of the oars. These boats sliced quietly and quickly through the water. We seemed to be moving very fast. The men began to sing songs which kept a kind of cadence. I tapped my foot to it quite naturally. We had music at home and at the meeting house on Sunday. Only approved hymns were allowed. Anything else was too distracting and interfered with our listening to and acting on God's Word. I wonder if the family misses us yet. Now that there is nothing for me to do, I know I miss Mother and Father and the rest of the kids, especially the little ones. Who will help with the harvest? Who will pick the fruit? I'm noticing how everything smells so different from any smells I know. Oh my, look at my dress, my arms. I've been bleeding from all these scratches. Wow, look at all those ducks. What river is this? Where does it go? Maybe west and north, I think? Though I don't really know. I think we're going upstream. I'm so scattered. Sarah sat in the bottom of the canoe between the powerful legs of her captor. The singing and the rhythm of the paddles rendered her helpless. She fell asleep, his leg as her pillow. Chapter 2. The trek north continues. I am startled awake. What is happening? My captor is pushing me down farther into the boat so I can't see. He is reaching under his pant leg and taking out something shiny. A knife. He's putting the blade of the knife between his teeth. So are the 2 other men in front of me. I hear some hoots from across the river and peek over the edge of the canoe and see 3 boats filled with Indians going downstream. I hear the men saying something to each other. Abenaki! Must be it is who they are talking about. The other men must be Abenakis. My captor prepared for a skirmish or battle in an instant. I would fear him if he looked at me the way he just looked at these passers-by. If they are saying Abenaki, then this man above me must be a Mohawk warrior. I now understand what the elders at the meeting house were talking about when they were describing the Mohawks as formidable enemies. Only they said we are stronger and there are more of us. We work harder and God is always with us. He will reward us for all our hard work. They will come rescue us, I'm sure. My friend Johnny was rescued last year and we will be too. As Matui's put his knife away and let me sit up in a more comfortable position, bravely for me, I called out to my brothers to see if they were okay. They responded, and Matui's yanked my tether hard again, so I guess I wasn't supposed to speak. Again, the singing continued, and I could massage my neck a bit since this collar made it very sore. I must have slept further. It is now late evening, and we are making for shore. The men in the first boat wade ashore and carefully check the surrounding shoreline. It seems safe, and we are called in. The men in front leap from the boat, followed by Matui's. I am the last out, and only after the boat is on shore. Matui's barks out some orders, and the men scatter in all directions. My brothers run to me, and I hug them. We are barked at, probably for making too much noise. Both boys want to ask the same questions at the same time, and whispering excitedly, quietly, Sarah, how are you? Does that thing around your neck hurt? You are bleeding from it. and the boys, looking up at her captor who was holding the thing around her neck, cower, asking, "Who is he?" "I think he is Metu, or something like that. It is the word I heard most often today that he responded to." "Metu, eh? What's that stuff in his hair?" quizzed Zachariah. "The guys we were with don't have it." "I think it is a bunch of porcupine quills. I know they are awfully picky. They were sticking into me when he was carrying me on his shoulders." Then pointing to her stomach, "Look, I'm bleeding from them." The captor heard them and saw them pointing to his knotted hair and the quills protruding from it. "Metues! Metues! I Metues!" he said with great authority and pointing to himself again. "I Metues!" With that he folded his arm over his chest and assumed his position of power over them. At this, little Zechariah points to his sister. She, Sarah, pointing to his big brother. He, John, and pointing to himself. I, Zechariah. He seemed quite pleased with himself that he could speak up to the big guy. He was not afraid. His antics brought a smile to Sarah's face, the first since this ordeal began. Metues nodded to little Zechariah as if to say he approved. He was thinking to himself that he quite possibly had found the young white men from the south he was commissioned to find and bring home. His mentor will be pleased. With the nod also came more barking of orders. A man was banging little rocks together and a fire was suddenly ablaze. Poles were erected and branches placed on them to create a lean-to for shelter. From the boat came several pouches of food. We were escorted to the water and shown how to eat from the pouches. In there was something like cornmeal, dried meat, dried berries, and something sweet like maple sugar. One would take a healthy pinch, maybe the size of a cherry, reach down with your other hand for water, and then mix the powder in the palm of your hand, making a paste, and eat it. Sarah wasn't ready to eat their food, still too stunned from her captivity. Metues yanked her tether again quite forcefully and motioned for her to eat. Reluctantly, she was able to choke down several bites, and he was satisfied she had had enough. The boys, however, took to it like fresh bread from the hearth. The men called it something that sounded like Po something, and my little comic brother had to throw in his name for it, Po-ridge, to make it sound like porridge we ate at home. The men laughed at his antics and tried in vain to copy his rendition of Po-ridge. Each time her neck leather is yanked, Sarah reaches up to it and holds it momentarily with both hands to lessen the pain, takes a quick, short breath, and does a quick mental check of her whole body. Each time her pulse quickens and then relents within a minute or two. She has never been treated really well. Her parents have always been harsh. Anyone who ever taught her lessons was harsh. The church elders were always harsh and demanding of her. No one ever said that they loved her. No one ever touched her simply to be nice. She might be touched while moving hay or corn bundles because they were too heavy or cumbersome. She certainly had never been touched by a man, and certainly not like this porcupine man was touching her, treating her with such disrespect. He must be the devil incarnate, evil. She wondered if her great-aunt Rebecca Nurse felt this way when the hanging noose was placed around her neck. She wanted so desperately to fight back, to hurt this man who was so hurting her in so many ways. She could say it, only he would not understand. She felt utterly alone. Even her God was not intervening. Even he was abandoning her. Darkness enfolded them. The embers glowed like the orange clouds at sunset. She said goodbye to the boys who crawled under their lean-to with the men. Metues was the last to enter. Sarah sat on the hard ground outside. This seemed to anger her captor, who pulled very hard on the leash and dragged her in close to himself. Her full weight was on the leash, and she had a very difficult time breathing, gasping for breath, choking. He was irritated by her lack of attention, and even as she was in such distress, he smacks her very hard in the middle of her heaving chest, as if this would stop her from her breathing difficulties. He wrapped her leash around his body twice, gave her his back, and fell asleep. Sarah lay there crying, sobbing deep inside without making a noise. Apathy crept in. Dying made perfect sense to her. Why has God forsaken her? Did Christ feel like this on the cross? Oh, how she missed her home and family. She needed to stay strong for the boys, and yet they were the ones staying strong for her. They seemed to be enjoying this adventure, which seemed to be and was pure torture for her. This was her fire and brimstone. How different they were. Sarah prayed to an inattentive God. Finally, sleep, even though filled with fitful dreams, came to her troubled mind and pain-filled body.